What's going on, YouTube? This is your boy Contagious One. Today I'm basically going to go over everything that you need to know to put together your own home recording studio, whether you're looking at spending maybe $1,000 to $1,500 for a pretty decent setup, or whether you're looking on spending something more serious like 12 to 15 grand to have kind of an ultimate home studio. We're going to cover all your bases, let you know all the basics, everything that you need to know from microphone to monitor to get you up and running and recording in no time. Before we get started, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I'm going to have more videos like this, product reviews, music videos, entertainment, whatever it is I can come up with to keep the channel up and running. Also follow me on all my channels, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Contagious One with the K, and I'll post the links in the comments section so you can do just that. Let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we're going to cover are microphones. You have two kinds of microphones out there. You have dynamic and condenser. Main difference between the two is that dynamic mics are more tailored for live performances at bars, clubs, whatever venues might be out there where you're going to be performing live. They don't quite pick up as much detail as condensers, but they're more heavily built to withstand abuse and, you know, more of an on-the-road type of microphone. Condensers, on the other hand, will pick up the world around you, depending on, you know, which mic and the quality of the mic that you have. If you live next to a swimming pool in an apartment complex, you can guarantee you're going to be able to hear kids swimming, screaming, hollering, birds chirping, all kinds of things like that, cars driving by. So whatever your environment is, you're going to want to have some kind of control over what gets into the microphone and into your room. With a condenser mic, you do need to have phantom power, which pretty much every interface nowadays comes with phantom power, so that's really not an issue. And if you have a preamp as well, which we'll cover, it's going to have phantom power on it as well. As far as my personal choice, I have here a Mojave MA200. This is a beautiful microphone for me. It picks up clarity, detail, it makes my vocals sound up front and, you know, real in your face. And of course I can use my compressor and other tools that we'll cover to smooth out that signal. I've gone through different microphones. I've gone through Neumann TLM103s, TLM49s, which I thought was great too. But in the end, this was the mic for me, and you'll have to really experiment yourself and go through a couple of microphones. So find a seller who's going to be okay with you returning open box items, because, you know, they can get a little upset if you're constantly buying, returning, and buying, returning. So, but I guarantee that in the end, when you find a mic that's for you, it's going to be well worth it. Now if you're on a budget, this mic here is about $1,100. You don't have to get this expensive of a mic. For the $500 and under price range, I know the Rode NT1A is pretty popular in my opinion from what I've used. I like the Bluebird. It runs for about 300 new. On eBay, you can usually find it for maybe about 200, and every now and then sellers like Sweetwater will do a sale. So just keep your eye out, but I'd highly recommend the Bluebird if you're on a budget. Now, just a quick tip on microphone placement where you decide to put it in your room. As for me, I have two GIK 244 panels right behind the mic, to each side on the door and the other side on the window, on a mic stand. I have two 242 panels, which aren't quite as thick. These 244s are more made to be bass traps, but I have them on the rear of my room for my mixing desk. You definitely want to have your front covered, the back covered as well, which is, as you can see by my room, I've done pretty well in acoustically treating my room, but still you want to make sure that you have as much covered as you can. And very important, having a cloud over your head is going to make a big difference, and I don't think enough people have that covered. Now you can buy one of those SE electronic, not sure what they're called, but you basically put them behind the mic, you know, just like this, and they're supposed to stop the sounds from going outwards. Those are okay. I used to have one. I don't think it was really that great, to be honest. But one thing that you do want to avoid is setting up your microphone in a closet. Now, if we go to my closet over here, I can show you it's not that big. I have a lot of clothes, a lot of things in here. And the problem with recording in a closet is something called comb filtering, which basically makes it sound, I don't know if you can tell right now, but it makes your voice sound like you're in a box. And you really don't want that when it comes to recording. It's going to show up in the end. So I would highly recommend recording out in the open with the proper treatment that you need so that your vocals sound as clean as they can possibly be. Okay, so now that we have microphones covered, there's two places we can go from here. If you're on a budget, you can just buy an interface. Interfaces do come with preamps built in, that they're not going to be as good as dedicated preamps. But in all honesty, you really don't want to spend a little bit of money on a low budget preamp. It'll make a little bit of a difference, but in my opinion, I think that this is where you want to spend big money if you're going to get a really good preamp and compressor. So if you're not willing to put all that money into it, you can always just get an interface and go straight from the mic into your recording interface. Budget interfaces I recommend are the Scarlett series from Focusrite. They have the 2i2, I believe. It's only maybe $200 or $300, and it's got, you know, for the price, it's gonna have pretty decent preamps, pretty good conversion. It'll have what you need to connect monitors, headphones, the microphone. It'll be a 2-channel input, which if you're doing things like hip hop or R&B, that's all you need. So unless you're recording a band, you really don't need more than that. Now if you are looking to put together more of a high-end home studio and you want to get a dedicated preamp, dedicated compressor, the whole legit, you know, signal chain, then that's where we'll go from here. So from a microphone, the signal travels down the XLR cable. Down from the XLR cable, it comes to a tube box, which not all microphones have, but this particular microphone does. So in this box, which you do have to power on, there is a tube which will warm up, which gives your signal a little bit more warmth, analog type of feel, so that your vocals are a little bit more warmer, fuller, you know, more emotional, I guess. They just sound a little bit better, in other words. So from there, we have another XLR cable, which runs all the way in back of my couch here, through the floor, and eventually ends up here at my Great River ME1NV preamp. This preamp is modeled after a Neve preamp, which is a pretty popular preamp in rock and roll, and it basically gives you a nice gritty in-your-face kind of sound. With this one, it has the gain knob and the output level, which you can use to dial it forward with a more aggressive, gritty, almost an overdrive type of sound in your face, or you can dial it back and have a more smooth and natural sound. This preamp runs about $1,100. Again, a preamp is not necessary. There are other options out there on the market in the low budget price range, maybe an Art. I believe it's the MPA Gold. Runs about $300. It has tubes in it, and those tubes are replaceable, which I would recommend that you do if you're going to go with that one, and it'll get you a pretty decent sound as well. Just a side note on preamps, there's going to be a lot of preamps out there. It really just comes down to personal choice and selection. Every preamp is going to have its own unique flavor and sound, so there's really not any specific go-to preamp. It really all just depends on your application and your preference. If you're doing hip-hop, the #1 most popular preamp out there is the Avalon 737. It was used by Dr. Dre and a lot of big name artists back in the day, and I think that's where it kind of got its fame from. It also has an EQ, which can be pretty clinical. It's a pretty good equalizer, and a compressor, which I do use, but it's kind of a slow compressor. It doesn't really do a lot to the sound. It just adds just enough depending on what you're looking for. Now, this Avalon isn't the go-to of all channel strips just because it's one of the most popular in hip-hop. If you were looking for something more on a budget, there's also the Robbie. It's made by Blue as well. It looks like a little funky robot head, a big dial on it, and the where the tube is, it's kind of a blue circle. It's a funny looking preamp. I've used it before when I had a TLM49, and it really does deliver a nice clean sound. It'll definitely give you that high-end sheen if that's what you're looking for. So for things like hip-hop and R&B, those are two preamps that I do recommend. Of course, it's all subjective. When I first started out, I had the MPA Gold from Art, and I replaced the tubes in there. I don't remember the brand of the tubes, it's been so long, but even with that and like a Rode NT1A microphone, I was still getting a pretty decent sound. So a lot of it has to do with the person behind the equipment and how good you're able to mix and make it sound, you know, with the plugins. So not everything is about the equipment itself. The Great River that I have, again, it's modeled after the Neve Pre, so you have grunge, gritty, clean, you know, shiny, full. There's just so many options out there on the market. You're gonna have to test it just like you would a microphone and find what's right for you. So from the microphone, we go into the preamp. from the preamp, I go into my Avalon 737 channel strip. Now, I'm just going into the compressor section using the line input. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that would probably say, well, why not just use the Avalon? It's got an EQ, it's got a preamp, it's got a compressor, it's all you need. This is true. The reason I happen to do it, which might seem silly to some, was because I was basically trying to mimic Dr. Dre's vocal chain that he used on 50 Cent's In the Club. I found an article in a magazine online where he basically gave the exact rundown on what he used, which was a Neumann TLM67, which the Mojave MA200 has kind of been compared to. He then ran it into a Neve preamp, which, guess what, that's what the Great River is pretty much a clone of, and then into the compressor section of an Avalon. Of course, from then he went on into a really good SSL mixing board, which I just don't have the money for that, because we're talking maybe about 50 grand, and I just don't have that kind of money. But anyway, as far as the Avalon goes, it's great. You can just use it as a standalone channel strip. I just choose to mimic Dr. Dre's vocal chain. And in all honesty, through all the preamps, compressors, microphones, everything that I've gone through, this is the vocal chain for me, and I'm more than happy with it. So to each their own. You definitely don't have to go this route. There are other compressors out there. There's a Distressor, a Purple Audio. I believe it's an MC77. There is a TLA 100 from Summit Audio. There's a lot of compressors out there. I couldn't even begin to name them all just because it's been a while since I've actually been looking into gear. I'm pretty happy with what I got, so there's really no need to. Again, this is what works for me. What works for you may be different. This does have a VU meter, which when I'm recording will move to show you in case you're clipping or anything. There are certain numbers that you want to achieve when you're recording, and I'm not going to get into all that because this is kind of just the basics, but there you have it. So from my Mojave MA200 into my Great River preamp into my Avalon 737 compressor section. So we have our signal chain. We have our microphone going into our preamp, going into our compressor, and finally it ends up in the interface. Now the particular interface I have is called a Steinberg UR824. It's got 8 inputs, as you can see by the numbers there. It has 2 headphone outputs, and it's got a volume control knob for your monitors. This particular interface can connect up to 4 sets of monitors, I believe. Don't quote me on that. I have 2 sets connected. The reason I chose this one was because it is $800, and for that price range, this has one of the best converters of any interface that's on the market right now. Conversion is basically how well your signal is maintained from microphone through your channel strips into your interface and out through your monitors again. It's a pretty subjective issue. A lot of people don't even worry about conversion until they have everything else. So there are converters you can buy that are dedicated converters that can run up into the thousands. Again, I wouldn't really worry about conversion until you have every part of the puzzle completed first. And even then, it's pretty subjective on how much of a difference it actually makes to the human ear in the end. So again, this is the preamp, or this is the interface for me. There's a lot on the market. You have $2,000 interfaces and you have $200 interfaces. So go with what your budget allows you to spend. If you're on a budget, I'd recommend the Focusrite ones. Of course, there's M Audio as well, and I'm sure there's quite a few other brands, but I would definitely go with whichever one you feel is going to suit you the best. Okay, so the big great debate, PC or Mac. Honestly, it doesn't matter at all. It all comes down to personal preference or maybe even budget. PC has programs Mac doesn't have, like Fruity Loops, Sony Vegas, I believe Sonar, and Mac has programs that only are available on it, such as Logic, Final Cut Pro, and things like that. So either way, it's going to be personal preference. I think the more important thing versus which type of computer you have is how much of a computer you have, and by that I mean the guts, what's in it. Let me see if I can focus in right here. I think you can see that my personal computer has 8 gigabytes of RAM, which is more than enough to run all my plugins, 3.2 gigahertz Core i5, 27 inch, obviously not necessary, but that's what I went with. So That's more than enough power to run all of your programs. And if you ever needed to run more, just upgrade your RAM. I believe I have a terabyte on this computer, which will be more than enough, more than I'll ever need. I mean, if you ever needed more than that, you can always purchase an additional hard drive. I have one here, and it's actually recommended that you get a hard drive to store all of your audio on. So all of my recordings, anything that I have, I store it on here, and I only keep my actual programs and sound libraries on the Mac itself. So it can be recommended that you only store your programs on your computer, and you have one hard drive for your recordings and one hard drive for your sound libraries. That was a bit much for me. I'm running on limited USB inputs. As you can see, I also have a extender here that gives me an additional 4 USB connections because I was already running out. Okay, so the first program, which is the program that I also use to record and you know, all my plugins and everything, this is the one program for me, and I don't know if I can zoom in here enough for you to be able to read it, and just barely. Logic Pro X, that's what I go with. I have a preset here, a folder, and it's an hip hop folder, so it already has this drum loop. I can press play, and obviously that's not going to win any kind of awards anytime soon, but as you can see here, you can add tons and tons of tracks of different sounds. I also have Complete, which I can upload and use those sounds too, which I'm not going to do right now. But Logic itself has a nice library of sounds. It should be all you need. Excuse my camera, it's trying to focus here. Let's give it something to focus on with my controller here. There's so many fancy controllers on the market. Akai has controllers, M-Audio has controllers, Innovation has controllers. I didn't really need all those buttons and knobs on my keyboard, so I just went with the Roland A49. As you can see, it has buttons here for octaves, so if you need to go higher on the keyboard, I don't have a keyboard loaded right now, but you can go higher or lower on the keyboard bed. This one is actually unique too, because instead of having a wheel for modulation and pitch bend, it's got this synthesizer type of little knob here, and I love it myself. I used to have a Roland Phantom X, and that's what I got used to, so for me it works out great. This one's only I believe a 49 key. That's all I need. As you can see, my desk doesn't have infinite space, and it works out perfect for mine. Of course, as you can see here with all these pretty colorful squares, I have a Machine Mark II. Again, it's all subjective on what you buy, but since I already had Complete, Machine just went natural with it. Machine is great. It's got a whole bunch of kits you can use. It's great for sampling, you know, anything of that nature. I think for hip hop, it's a wonderful piece of gear to own. I use it more actually than I would the keys. Keys are just a secondary thing now that I own the Machine. I highly recommend this. It does have a little bit of a learning curve, but once you get it down, it's pretty seamless. There's different models of it. There's the Micro, and then there's the $1,000 Juggernaut, the Studio, which subjective. Personally, I don't think you need anything more than this. If you want to spend the extra money on a bigger controller, it's going to do the exact same thing, but it's all personal preference. So between Machine, Complete, my keyboard, and all the sounds that I have in Logic, you know, other than maybe sampling records or something, this is pretty much all I'll ever need, and all that any of the producers and beat makers that I work with should ever need. One of the last things that I'm going to get into now is monitor selection, studio monitors. You know, depending on what you're doing, you might want a different set of monitors than the next man. If you're just making beats and it's bass heavy, you might want to pick up a pair of monitors like some Rockets. 8-inch cones would probably be preferred. It really depends on your budget and what you're going for. For me, I'm looking to mix. I'm looking for 2 sets of speakers. I want my A pair to be my mains. I want them to have a lot of power and energy. When I listen to music on them, I want to be able to vibe with it and feel it and enjoy my music. And on my second pair, I want to do my critical editing on. So I want them to be flat and boring, and you know, make me really have to work to get a good mix on them, because if I can get a good mix on them, then I'll know that it should sound good anywhere. And between the two, if I can get get a good mix going, listening back and forth, maybe between my Beats wireless headphones, my cell phone, whatever else I have that I can listen to and compare on. If I can get a pretty good mix across all the different platforms, then I think I have a pretty good mix that I can submit to my mastering engineer and have him take it over from there. So let me go ahead and let you know what I chose for myself. So these are my B pair, my reference monitors. They are Yamaha HS5s. They are extremely boring and flat, and you will not be able to enjoy music through them. They sound so boring that they force you to create a good mix. If you can mix and make your music sound good through these, then they're going to pretty much sound good on anything, and that's pretty much the whole idea behind these monitors. They're 5-inch cones. I have them sitting on these ISO acoustic stands. I highly recommend that you get ISO acoustic stands. Yes, you can get the little foam inserts as well, but these actually work like great. I mean, it's a night and day difference from having them on the desk and on these stands. Now, that's my B pair. My main pair are my Focals. I just got them in not that long ago. These are the Alpha 65s. I was going to go for the CMS 65s, which are double the price, but when I heard these, I was blown away, and they've been doing me justice. I have them on these DR Pro monitor stands, which are made of wood. They're maple. They were really a big pain to fill with sand. I recommend if you get stands like this that you fill them up with sand. It's going to make a huge difference. At the end of the day, you have your set that you can enjoy and really feel the music, and you have your critical listening set. I think that's going to go a long way in getting a really good mix to translate outside of the studio. Where do we plug it all into? I have two Furman PL8C channel strips right here. As you can see, they have these lamps. It's got a little knob here. You can turn down the light, you can turn up the light, you can click it and turn them off. These are basically glorified power strips, but they are necessary. They claim to clean up the signal. If you have any kind of surge strikes, they're supposed to protect against them. If you have any kind of noise coming in from your power plugs, they're supposed to cancel that out. How much they actually help is all subjective. I really don't know. I might have just been able to buy $15 power strips from Walmart and been just as fine, but it's one of those peace of mind things, just like the Mogami cables. So I have them. I have everything running through them. You may not need two. I only needed two because of how many things I have to plug in. But again, it's all peace of mind, and they definitely do their job, and I don't have any kind of problems when it comes to power management. Okay, so last but definitely not least, one of the most important things that you can do for your room is to acoustically treat it. You can have $1,000 monitors, and it really won't make a difference if you don't have some kind of treatment in your space. One of the most important treatments I've made is adding a cloud, 2 panels right above my mixing desk, and it keeps the sound from bouncing off the desk and off the ceiling to create an echo. Directly to my rear is where I have the microphone set up, and I have a cloud above that to deal with reflections as well. I have 2 bass traps on the wall there. They handle bass frequencies that come from my monitors, and I have 2 bass traps in each corner, and it really does make a difference, trust me. I have 244, which are the smaller panels on the side walls. These are pretty much meant to be to the sides of the monitors, as you can see here, and this is just an extra one here that I have thrown in under a nice TV, which is not needed at all. I have a panel to the window, which is to the side of where I record, and then I have one here on the other side. So all in all, I have a lot of acoustic panels in my studio. It does make a big difference. It's night and day. I've had them in my home theater, and it really makes a big difference. You can hear details, pins and needles, things that you wouldn't normally pick up without them. So I highly recommend it to kill those echoes and flutters and really get a controlled sound in your recording room. So with all of this fancy equipment, I definitely recommend you have homeowners or renters insurance. You definitely don't want to lose this in case of a fire or theft or anything like that. Definitely back up all of your recordings and all of your material, and have a security system as well. And you also want to have a cold-blooded killer ready to strike anyone who would dare break in. Snoop, sit. As you can see, he's trained to kill. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that it's going to help you out. If you have any questions, please ask away in the comments. I'm not a pro, but I try to be, and I will definitely help you out as much as I can with whatever information I can. Until then, keep subscribing, keep following, and I'll see you next time.